issues, you know, and I stand up for education, as you could well imagine, but when there's something wrong, then we fix it. And if we're not auditing how we're spending our money, then there's a little bit of a hole there that we better fill.
Right. So, Albuquerque is a sanctuary city. Talking about incarceration, ICE, as of a week ago, I was helping with a rally because ICE was going up and down Central and in and out of restaurants and arresting employees and patrons who they were targeting. We need to do more within our city limits with city administrators on protecting our people. But what could you see as a statewide initiative of something that we could do to protect undocumented citizens of New Mexico?
Well, I think we would rely on what it is that the law allows us to do, and not necessarily in that form and fashion, but what it is that we have to do, and if the state of New Mexico can choose to disregard some of those things that General Sessions wants us to do, and we want to take a stand, and we're willing to be bold enough to do that, let's take that stand. I mean, this whole thing started with Sessions. We know a couple of weeks ago he said, I'm going to get tough on this sort of thing, and now, I don't know, just the other day I think we heard that we ought to kill people, literally kill people. The president said that, right? You're following what I'm saying? That for those who have drug offenses or drug dealers, who are we targeting here? That statement alone was about as racist as you're going to be able to get. Who's going to that going to fall upon? You know, people of color, women more than anything else that are out there. They're going to be the first ones. So, can we change that? The state of New Mexico have the opportunity to do? Sure can. We can get it through the House and Senate. We can get it up to the governor that'll sign those pieces of legislation. Why are we having to follow rules and regulations that hurt our own people?
So how do you see yourself being able to stand up to the federal government on this border wall issue?
Well, I love some of the people that are actually running for other positions, that have immediate control of our state lands and saying, you know what, we're not going to allow you to do it. Plain and simple, it's our state land. We're just not going to allow you to do that. Take us to court, go ahead. And if you want to buy some land, charge them an exorbitant rate, and let's see how long that happens. We'll spend our time in court and the wall doesn't get built. And anyway, I thought Mexico was to pay for it. Whatever became of that one.
It's all rhetoric, right?
It is rhetoric.
Do you see yourself as somebody who could help to change that narrative and help to build support for the undocumented in our state?
I have all my life, and I will continue to do so. My history says that I've been to do that, because these are people that are living and paying taxes in the state of New Mexico. People that think they don't pay taxes, I'm sorry, I've never been to that line that says undocumented here, no taxes paid. No, we all pay taxes. We buy a loaf of bread. I'm sorry.
So there's another layer of private prison that has happened in New Mexico as of recent, especially with all of these ramp-ups. And there's specific counties like San Miguel County, for example, Cibola County, who are building entire economies around these detention facilities, working with the federal government. And they're doing these contracts through the county administration directly with CCA. Do you see the Lieutenant Governor's office being able to have any kind of influence or being able to help these counties find other economic avenues so that we can stop the business of incarceration in some of these smaller counties?
Thank you for that, because you just said that was my answer. I was thinking, was you asking me the question, so the answer is, can we give them another opportunity, a better way to make money than just building prisons when there's so much more out there? Let's give them something different other than that as a way to help that particular county. There are many other ways, solar farms, wind farms. I mean, there are other ways to utilize, because everybody's got a significant portion of state land out there. Why not use that state land for everybody's benefit instead of, privatizing prisons, which don't help the client?
How do you see yourself as a mediator to go into these counties and work with the local governments to persuade them away from this immediate revenue?
Having the conversations that are needed and using the Lieutenant Governor's office to have those, create those, initiate those conversations.
So talking about energies, that was actually leading right into my next question is, how do you see yourself in leading New Mexico to 100% renewables? We have some really offensive things, in my opinion, that are going on, like the fracking of Chaco Canyon. How are we going to protect our sacred lands and fault lines against the gas and oil industry, which is really big business here in New Mexico? How do we change our vision of what energy sources look like in New Mexico?
I think we find ways to convince people and convince those that are on the sidelines that just because we move away from gas and oil, that doesn't mean we're not going to be making any more money, and so therefore, oh my goodness, we've lost everything. I mean, we talked about state lands, and if I can have a solar farm and a wind farm that's out there on state lands, and any money that we make selling energy to another state, just like we do with gas and oil, we get that money and we put it in that same fund that we're supposedly losing money from, then we've lost nothing whatsoever. And do we charge the similar or amounts? That'll be the same. We don't have to give up one and lose the other one. One can work with the other one if we utilize our state properties accordingly, and I would push for that, and I have been talking about that my entire time, is why is it that everybody has to feel like it, oh my goodness, we cannot give up on gas and oil, that's our only way. That's not our only way. There are other ways we can make money, and we don't have to worry about that. We got lots of state land, and we could invest in that.
What is your relationship with the gas and oil industry? Do you have one with them? And is this a conversation that you're willing to have with them?
Well, I'm certainly willing to have them. I'm sure they know who I am over the many years that I was in the legislature. I went with those individuals. Do I have a personal relationship with them? No. But the Lieutenant Governor's office, by the name in and of itself, says, let's have a meeting. I think they're going to show up. And I think they're in a position themselves where they're seeing their own business. Fracking isn't the way for them to be going, not in a state that says, we don't want you here. They're going to figure out other ways to work with it, and maybe they can get into the wind and solar farm and energy themselves. They're in the energy business. Why not? Why not convince them to move along?
To transition over. So, in talking about the energy and water needs, I think about sovereign nations. I work a lot with tribal people, and we have entire pueblos. The Navajo Nation has pockets where they don't have any water. They literally don't have water. We have places that don't have access to electricity yet. These are our people. These are our native people who were here long before us. And do you see yourself as being in a position as if you were Lieutenant Governor, to be able to help bridge some of those gaps and help to bring what's needed to the sovereign nations?
Oh, by far. And thank you for that last word. You're answering my questions all the time. I was going to say, we have to stop treating them like the guy who lives down the street and start treating them like they always should have been treated. With any work that we do with them, consider them as treaties, and any work that we do, consider them as nations, and not just some guy who lives down the street and we're going to go ahead and put a road right through your sovereign land. But that's the way they've been treated.
Exactly.
And then treaties that have been broken over and over again. But most importantly, the fact that this is their land, they make that decision. Their water starts from those. They have senior water rights. We talk about senior water rights. Those are important. They have senior water rights. They're not to be said, okay, let's have an agreement right here. No, that's not an agreement. It should be a treaty. It should be treated as a treaty.
So do you see yourself being able to bridge that gap?
Oh,
what are your relationships right now?
I've been doing that for quite some time. It just so happens that the area that I represented for many, many years was the old Indian school property and everything that comes around that. All Indian Pueblo Council's offices are right down the street, just from where I live. I've been having meetings just a couple of days ago, talking about the democratic platform as to how it relates to the Native Americans. I've been doing that for quite some time. Helped create the Indian Education Act. I have a long history, only because I feel that actually they were here first, and we need to respect that.
Beautiful. So, I'm sorry, I had lost my train of thought. So talking about, one of the questions that somebody had wanted to hear from you is about campaign contributions. And how do you feel about corporate campaign contributions into local elections and the influence that it's having? And where do you stand on it? And how do you see us being able to get money out of politics so that it's a more fair playing field going forward?
Well, we would really love to have that latter part, but you take money out of politics, then I don't know how I get my message across to you. I don't know how other people feel, or those who have a whole lot of money to get that message out, and then you land up getting the wrong person in there, because where do they get their money from? I mean, those are the important issues. So, yeah, I could easily just say I don't want to have any money in politics, and then that's the last you'd ever hear of Rick Miera. I mean, it's just not a little fair to somebody else who's been able to come in here and sweep up loads of money from people that you didn't really want that person that you now have as lieutenant governor getting. That's very important issues. So it becomes up to the candidate. And the candidate needs to make those kinds of decisions. I made those decisions long time ago. You go back and look at, because all my campaign contributions are open. I used to run my campaign for 1/15 of what others run their campaign, because it's how I campaign. You don't ever see a television ad on Rick Miera. I can't afford, nor I'm willing to go out there and search for that kind of money to keep those things going. It's $150,000. I'm not going to do that. So it's really up to the candidate. But then you say, but then you didn't even hear from the candidate. And other people say, oh, the candidate doesn't have enough money to run a statewide campaign. Well, then you're in a rather unique situation. Then go out and get money. Well, then where are you going to get your money from? So
Exactly.
my feeling is about people that really want to support their candidates. They need to give those $5 and $10 donations. Bernie wasn't all that bad when we talked about it, because if not, then you're restricting yourself to having a limited amount of information going out about who you are, and somebody else has a big advantage because they're willing to take money from people that I would never take money from.
And so you do see that is corrupting within the political structure.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that as lieutenant governor going forward when we have candidates who aren't representing the people appropriately? How do we hold them accountable?
Well, you hold them accountable because you find out because that's open. You find out who they're getting their money from, and there's your answer right there. Okay, how do they get so much money? Where do they get their money from? Oh my goodness, they're taking it from them. I can't support that individual, so it's up. But for me or anybody else like myself that really doesn't look at taking money from individuals that accounts that I don't want to take money from, alcohol and tobacco and things of that nature. Don't get those kinds of money. Don't ask for it. Don't want it. But it takes research, and people can't be playing against that middle, saying, "Well, I didn't hear about that individual. How does Rick Miera get all the way down to Hobbs?
Mm-hmm.
How does Rick Miera get all the way up to Raton? I can't come in and say I'm running for lieutenant governor and let me have free gas." It doesn't work that way. But on the other hand, small amounts of donations make a big difference. Then
that's
you don't
what's
have to.
key.
It's a people's campaign, and it should be.
Thank you for that. My last little piece here is really talking about the war economy in New Mexico. We have places like Los Alamos, like Kirtland Air Force Base. The war economy tends to create ghettos and poverty right outside their gates. You can look at almost any military base anywhere, and right outside the gates you have these systems of poverty and crisis. What can you do, you think, from the lieutenant governor's perspective, to be able to start addressing those kinds of issues?
I think first of all, we have to have, as we've talked about before, about taking a look at exactly why that, and if we have what you just described, and it's a relationship to the money that was brought in for those bases or whatever, and if you can establish that relationship, then maybe we should be taking more out of what it is that we're expecting out of those contracts to address not only the contract needs, but the problems that they're creating on the outside of their fence. If you can establish that relationship, then that should be part of the negotiation when it comes to, I think we need this amount of money to run this program, and we need some more money to take care of all these problems that you create on the outside. I mean, that's a fair and honest question. It deserves a good look and an investigation, because if this, then that, then they should be together.
And there are some really incredible and profound studies that have already happened surrounding that. We can look at U.S. bases around the world even have the same impacts in other countries. So this is something that is real and does have a valid connection. I can get you those studies.
And I'd love to have them, because then you can prove the fact that when we're negotiating with whoever's going to be giving monies to the people you were just talking about that live in those areas, and it's a result of what's happened, then that contract should, the next year's contract should reflect the fixing and the establishment of homes and communities and everything, because communities is where it's really all about. A healthy community, everything we've talked about here today, all about a healthy community.
Exactly.
It's all about it, whether it's mental health, it's substance abuse, it's jails, it's the monies from people we're getting from, and who's running the show. It's all about a healthy community, and there's no reason that everybody in New Mexico shouldn't demand a healthy community.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Is there anything you think we didn't talk about that the people should know about you?
Well, I think I dilly-dallied around a little bit about it, but I think one of the big issues is, unfortunately, mental health these days and behavioral health.
Yes.
We have taken a step back from the days of the late 80s, and when Ronald Reagan decided to come in and change everything. Behavioral health went down the tubes, and now it's a different population, and they're younger for whatever reason. The mental health population, the people in the streets, they're younger. We need to address those issues. They're different, and the solution isn't the old solution, it's a new and a different solution. And I think the other is that education, everybody talks about, I talk about my education. You know what I want to talk about? I want to talk about the V in TVI. For those people who are listening to, you remember what TVI was all about?
I went to TVI.
Hey, you remember TVI. Thank you so much. Talking with a young person. And that's what's sorely missing, and that's what Rick Miera as Lieutenant Governor is all about when it comes to education. Let's put the V back in,
Vocational programs.
Yes, we're missing it. We have some great high schools, and they're doing some great work, and everybody's going to college. No. Some will go to college, and those who want to should. And we should provide a great opportunity for them to get there. But we're missing out on the V, and that's what's going to be a big issue for me. Putting vocational training, vocational opportunities back in schools, back in high schools, back in post-secondary education, and even dabbling in the junior high level, in the middle school level, about some vocational. I'm not talking about channeling. It's a whole different story.
Right.
Not, well, this test, you got to go this way. No. You want to do that, you should
It's
have
about
those
access
opportunities.
and introduction to those trades.
And we don't even have that. Big issues for me.
I love that. Thank you. And maybe we can think about it on that topic about bringing those things into the prison system.
The prison system, that's what I talk about post-secondary.
A lot of those guys are very, very talented, and I think it's just, we're wasting all of those skills in our people.
Yep.
So thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming in.
You're welcome.
Meeting with me, and thank you for the informal setting of my home and all that comes with it.
And all that comes with it.
Thank
Pleasure
you.
was all mine.